and welcome to episode 84 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. This is your co-host, Sam Marvin. I'm here with Sean. Sean, how you doing?
Yawn. Episode
Yawn.
2.
Oh.
Yes, Yawn. Episode 2 of House of the Dragon. Color me bored.
Color me bored. You texted me after you finished your watch and said, I didn't like this one very much. And so I had that going in because I didn't watch.
Except for the final scene. I did say the final scene knocked it out of the park, but...
And we'll get to that.
Just a whole lot of talking, plot development, preparation for battle. And my whole argument is, Sam, you just killed an infant, the heir to the king. How are people not going to battle yet?
Yeah. I mean, I said this in our last episode where if I were Egan, I would have gotten on my dragon immediately and flown to Dragonstone, and I would have killed everybody that got in my way. And I would have been like, hey, Aemond, get on Vhagar. We're going to Dragonstone right now. You, me, we're going to take them all out. And I felt like that would have been in his character. But anyway, we're not going to dissect episode 2. It's not a fatal flaw to the show. Episode 3, Sean had that reaction. We're going to talk about it. But first, we should summarize the episode. So I clipped this from Wikipedia without objection. I'm going to enter it into the record. Here we go. House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 3, The Burning Mill. In the Riverlands, the feuding Brackens and Blackwoods fight a deadly battle over a minor dispute. To avert war, Rhaenys tells Rhaenyra that Alicent may see reason. Criston proposes a bold plan to conquer Harrenhal. Daemon arrives first, whereupon Sir Simon Strong, the Castellan, pledges allegiance. That night, Daemon has a vision of a young Rhaenyra sewing Jaehaerys' severed head onto his body. He awakens, and an unknown woman foretells Daemon's death. Rhaenyra sends Rhaena, her younger children, and dragon eggs to the Arryns to protect the Targaryen line should the Blacks fall. Mysaria becomes Rhaenyra's advisor, while Aegon makes Larys his master of whispers. At a brothel, a man claims to be King Viserys' bastard half-brother. Aegon and his squires arrive and encounter Aemond there. Aegon cruelly taunts a naked Aemond. Baela, patrolling on Moondancer, spots Criston's squad en route to Harrenhal and reports back to Dragonstone. Rhaenyra's counselors recommend war with dragons. Instead, Rhaenyra sneaks into King's Landing disguised as a septa, but is unable to negotiate a peaceful resolution with Alicent. Rhaenyra realizes Alicent misunderstood King Viserys' dying words and mistook her son, Aegon, for the prophesied Aegon the Conqueror. So, Sean, you opened up with yawn. You texted me that this wasn't great except for the final scene. Go into that. Dive into that. Take me with you.
Yeah, like I said, to open up, I just feel like if you needed an excuse to really get the war going, it would be the assassination of an infant in his crib or whatever, his little infant bed. I don't know what you call beds for infants.
A bed.
And then the attempted assassination of the other monarch. I just feel like after both of those situations, people would be a little bit more hasty. And I know people are trying to stop the two monarchs from being hasty and going to war, but it just doesn't feel natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
Seems out of place, a little weird, a little boring. And then I completely forgot about that whole scene with that guy claiming to be the bastard brother of Viserys or whoever he was claiming to be. And that scene ended up going nowhere. It was just really random, addition. And then I feel like it just took up 5 minutes for no reason. And then Aegon shows up, buys everybody around, and then boom, scene's over. They move on. It just seemed really weird and out of place.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, it might come to something later, but in this episode, it seemed like just filler.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting pretty tired of all of the filler information that they were given to me.
Let's circle back to the scene with the guy in the bar. His name's Ulf. We'll come back to that because it is set up for something. And I think it's fair to criticize how they're going about that setup because it is something from the books. But to your point, your your primary point with Rhaenyra, I agree with you that at this point it's getting a little old. They would be going to war at this point. According in Rhaenyra's mind, they've usurped her throne despite her father's wishes. They've stolen her throne, her birthright. They have killed her son, and they attempted to kill her. Regardless of the assassination of Jaehaerys, Rhaenyra personally should be sufficiently motivated to at least start taking aggressive action. Not necessarily, take the dragons and burn, but they need to be doing something. Like, you could see that she could have been supportive of Daemon's decision to get a toehold in the Riverlands, or just do something. And I think we're starting to see her council be justified in their push for war. I mean, at first it was just kind of that one guy who maybe spoke out of turn and was a little too brusque, but now it's everybody seemingly on her council, with maybe the exception of Rhaenys. But yeah, it's at this point it seems to be stretching a little bit, it seems like that final scene, which we both liked, is the nail in the coffin for the talking and the dithering, and now we're going to get to the war.
I mean, and those scenes with Rhaenyra sneaking in to King's Landing, with Daemon sneaking into King's Landing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've got spies. They have the lady with the bad accent, Mysaria, or whatever her name is, who was basically master of spies in King's Landing. And you've shown me multiple scenes now where Aemond is not on Vhagar and is like cuddling with some lady in a brothel. And you're telling me you can't sneak a spy in to be like, oh, yeah, Aemon's like a 2-hour walk from Vhagar.
Yeah.
Let's everybody get on our dragons in Dragonstone, which is probably like a 2-minute flight.
Yeah.
Then just fucking burn everybody alive. Like, it's like, for how close all of these people are, and not like the trope of, oh, Daenerys just all of a sudden gets to the north on Dragonback and all that shit. This is like across the bay.
Yeah.
Like, it's very easy for these dragons to like just get to where they need to be. And it's hard for me to believe that being so close to each other, everybody's kind of just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, being like, oh yeah, we're all just kind of sitting here waiting. But like you said, the final scene of the episode was amazing. So let's talk about that first. My eyes just lit up when the scene was taking place.
It was maybe the most well-directed, well-acted, believable scene in any Game of Thrones / House of the Dragon episode ever. It was, I thought both actresses were phenomenal. I thought the setting was perfect. You even had like the vague chanting in the background and the candles, or it could have been really hokey, right? Like, oh, I'm going to dress up like a nun and sneak in and do the sneak into the church thing. And even at the beginning, when Rhaenyra like pulled out the knife and like grabbed Alicent and said, basically like, don't cry out or whatever. And she's like, I've begun badly. Like, even that was so, like, it was just so good. And
because she said something about, I'd be able to kill you.
Yeah, like your knights
screamed.
Your knights would strike me down, but I would kill you first. And then you could see Alicent's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Fuck?
Like, yeah, and then like Rhaenyra was like spot on with that comment. It was, and then from there, it's just so good. And this is you finally got what you've been talking about when we did our review of season 1. People talking about the thing that they're causing confusion and conflict.
Yeah. My frustrations from the entire first season, were not lifted, because I was like, this could have, again, it doesn't move your plot forward. So, I mean, we wouldn't get the House of the Dragon if people would have communicated in the first season. But like I said in our season 1 review, when you use the same structure over and over again to move your plot forward, it gets really tiresome. So then to finally see two characters be able to like sit down and talk to each other, and then have that realization of, oh my God, you misunderstood what Viserys was saying. And Alicent's recognition of that, like, oh my God, he's talking about the Conqueror. And it was just so well played.
You think Alicent recognized that she was mistaken and now is refusing
Yes.
to acknowledge it? Okay.
No, I don't
I
think she's refusing to acknowledge it. I think she recognized because she even says it's too late as she's walking away.
Yeah, well, because she
So
realizes like I've got no power. My dad's gone. My son is super pissed. My other son is a loose cannon.
yeah, so that's your interpretation of that. To me, my interpretation of it is I fucked up. It is too late. All of these things have been set in motion. And then she says, my son's pissed. Aemon's a loose cannon. Like all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no way all of that can be pulled back now. But no, I totally think she realizes that she fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
And it's great for Rhaenyra because she's like, oh yeah, I'm totally in the clear. I'm right.
Yeah.
All of
It
these people really did usurp my throne. I have the righteous authority now to pursue my war.
it does help remove any doubt among the characters that war is necessary at this point to resolve these disputes. Because you the only reason Rhaenyra was there was because she held on to some hope that war could be avoided, and now we're going to get it. And I think, and there might also have been because you said this is episode 3 and what is going to be an 8-episode season, and we haven't gotten a ton of conflict outside of a couple of you had the fight between Eric and Arik, you had the infiltration scenes, but you didn't have a lot of battles. The one battle we've had so far, we only see the aftermath, which maybe we can talk about briefly later down the road. But I think this might have also been like a budgetary decision of like, we can't jam pack season 1 with all these fights because we just can't afford to do the CGI for all the horses and the people and the dragons. We can't afford all the extras and everything else. So first few episodes, we're going to have a lot of scenes of people talking in rooms about things. We're going to have some smaller action scenes, and then we're going to ramp it up. And I think we see in the previews that like we're going to get some full on sieges of castles and potentially some dragons in action.
Next up is Sam's favorite scene, naked Aemon. I'm sure you were quite aroused at this scene.
No, I will not say that I was aroused. It was humorous in when we had Aegon pulling back the curtains in the brothel, revealing all of these groups of people having sex in various arrangements. Yeah, we get another shot of Aemon kind of naked, curled up on this older madam. He didn't look as frail this time. Once he stood up, he's a lithe, muscular dude. And again, not arousing to me, but reassuring that he doesn't have any sort of wasting disease. And I think he has some comment at the end of that scene. It was like, one whore is interchangeable. I can't remember the exact line of dialogue, but basically you can see he said something because I think he's just covering up his wounded, I won't call it pride, but he seems to have a connection with this person, and Aegon kind of ruined it and embarrassed him. And so he's hiding that as he's walking away and kind of trying to diminish his connection with this person who obviously means a lot.
Oh, because he says something like, I'm not using her anymore. Feel free.
Yeah, something like that. Like
it was
really disparaging to this woman who obviously he has a connection with, and we've seen that. But backing up even before we get to the brothel, this is kind of the second of the carousing scenes. The first one is in more of a tavern. The plot summary said it was in a brothel, but it's not. That was a tavern where people were just drinking, and later the brothel's elsewhere. Before Aegon and his knights of the Kingsguard, who a day ago used to be his drinking buddies and are now, I guess, still his drinking buddies, but now they're also in the Kingsguard, which Kristen Cole's just like series of disappointments with these people was great. Like, they're sitting down, they're leaning, and they're yawning, and they don't look like dignified knights at all.
He kills Arik for having a dirty cloak, and then this is what he gets to replace, like a good knight.
Yeah, with dudes who are like joking at their vow of chastity in the morning before they go to out carousing and go to brothels. So in that scene, we're introduced to this character named Ulf, who actually I think we've seen before. He was walking around looking at all the rat catchers who'd been strung up. And actually, in this scene, did you catch there was another character who we've met before? Did you happen to catch this?
No.
The serving girl who brings the drinks to their table. She was the former handmaid to
That Aegon assaulted?
Helena, who Aegon assaulted, and then they paid off. And remember, we speculated, or I speculated, that maybe she was going to be disposed of, but nope, she got a new job, and you could see like she was, I guess, technically sexually assaulted. Somebody touched her without her permission, and she had a look of shock that might have been a subtle reminder to the audience that you've seen this person before, and she was emotionally disturbed because of a sexual trauma. So
I'm going to take this moment to say I was right, and Alicent wouldn't have her killed.
Okay, so you and Kristen Cole defending Alicent to the end.
Eat some crow, Sam.
Yeah, I was wrong there. But hey, the groundwork that they laid in that scene was Ulf. This character Ulf claims to be the bastard son of Baelor, or Balon the Brave, who was the father of Viserys and Daemon. This would have been, he was at one point in line to be the king. In fact, I think he may have been the hand of the king briefly. Obviously a Targaryen, but he died before he could ascend the throne. And allegedly, by this character, Ulf fathered at least one bastard. And this is a character that is in the book. He picks up the name Ulf the White. He and Hugh Hammer are both characters in the book. And minor spoiler alert, at some point, at an early point in this war, the Targaryens go on a quest, go on a search for people who have some Targaryen heritage and might be able to ride dragons, because they need more dragon riders, especially the Targaryens on Dragonstone. They have more dragons than they have riders, and it would be an advantage. And so in the prior episode, we spent time with Hugh the blacksmith, seeing kind of his home situation and getting a sense of kind of his struggles. Here we see Ulf, who I think he made reference to not having any coin, but seemingly he likes to party, so always in need of some additional funds. This is set up for the dragon seeds, which I think Ulf calls himself a dragon seed, which is just a term for somebody who has some Targaryen ancestry, even if it's through,
or he says, "I'm the seed of the dragon," or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. We will see him again if they stick with what's going on in the books, just as we will see Hugh Hammer again, as we'll see in the books, and they will be interesting, pivotal characters. I'll say that much.
Next up, we're going to go to the departure of the Green's army from King's Landing, where we see Alicent's brother, Gawain.
Party on, Gawain.
Sir Gawain, the Green Knight.
The Green Knight, yeah, there you go.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
What about him? So my big thing is I just felt like it was an awkward introduction. For a moment, it seemed like there was tension definitely between Kristen Cole and Alicent and Gawain. It kind of feels like Alicent has been telling Gawain about what's going on between her and Kristen.
The affair, you think?
It seemed something.
I didn't get that.
Because Gawain looks at Kristen like he knows something is going on with him. And I think he kind of treats him kind of shittily. Like he kind of looks down to Kristen Cole. And that could be something about their past and how he knows Kristen Cole's come from more modest beginnings to where he is now. It could be that he's pissed that he's now the hand of the king and his dad isn't anymore, and he's suspicious of that. But I don't know. It just felt like a very weird interaction between the three of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It was bizarre, and I didn't like it.
It was awkward. I think it was because of those two reasons that you mentioned. I think it's a class, nobility origin. Gawain even mentions this, like, oh, somebody of such modest beginnings. I think there's also the resentment of, you took my dad's job. You took my dad's job. And then he even said something about like a Dornish, like, riding to war with a Dornishman, which they're historically, and I think it was referenced in the conversation between Ulf and that merchant who was Dornish, that the Dornish are not part of the Seven Kingdoms, despite the title King of the Rhoynar being attributed to whoever sits the Iron Throne. But the Dornish have a long
Are
history.
are the Dornish Rhoynar?
That is, so there are three ethnicities in Dorne. There are the, can I get this right? There are the salty Dornishmen who are like live by the ocean.
Okay.
There are the sandy Dornishmen who live in the desert. And I think there's like the rocky Dornishmen who live in the mountain passes.
Real imaginative.
Yeah, hey, George R. R. Martin. So I'm rereading Clash of
Hmm.
Kings, right? The second I'm rereading the Song of Ice and Fire right now. I'm in the middle of the Clash of Kings. When I was reading Game of Thrones, which was the first book in the series, people kind of forget some of George R. R. Martin's like in jokes that he puts in there. Like there's a reference to the Three Stooges that nobody like. I don't want to say no. People obviously get it and point it out, but it's every once in a while it's good to be reminded that George R. R. Martin is not a he's a very good writer and he's very funny, but he's not an uber genius. And so sometimes like, I need to come up with some names for these people who live in this place. Okay, Salty,
I'll do it with
Sandy, and
a
Rocky.
George R. R. Martin accent
I
or
can't do. I can't.
impersonation. Huh, I just need to come up with some names for these places.
That's pretty good. Okay,
Thank you.
that'll work. You'll be our George R. R. Martin impersonator. Anyway, so historically speaking, the Dornish, who are not in the Seven Kingdoms at this point, are not a part of the realm. They would have these intermittent cross-border raids and minor wars with the houses of the Stormlands and the Reach. And so I think that's actually how Kristen Cole had experience in battle, was one of these kind of ongoing minor fights like over the mountain passes. And so the High Towers they're in the Reach. They're in the part of the Seven Kingdoms. Their seat is in Old Town, which is it was the biggest city in Westeros before the founding of King's Landing, and it remains a major center of commerce and learning and the faith, and had been raided by the Dornish in these ongoing battles. So there might be a little bit of ethnic resentment or something like that, or one of these grudges. But I think it's much more so those other two. We will see, because I think in the preview we get more time with Gwaine. I will say though, regarding the relationship between Alicent and Cole, it seemed like Gwaine was studying the way that they interacted with one another, as if he's trying to pick up, or he has started to pick up on some sort of dynamic, because he observes them as she like gives Kristen Cole her favor, which is a fun callback to when Daemon asked her for her favor in a joust against a Hightower, who I think that was Gwaine Hightower. I think that was the name. And obviously you can have two different characters named Gwaine. And if this Gwaine Hightower was the same one, then that means either one, that actor is really young for his age, or they intentionally cast someone very young, or he was super young when he was in episode 1 of season 1, which was like at least 20 years ago in the timeline of the show. Anything else on this? Because I have one small observation that I want to make.
Give me that observation.
Okay. So Kristen Cole and Alicent Hightower are having a conversation, and in the background, out of focus, Gwaine Hightower is mounting a horse, and it's like very obvious. And the only reason I say that is because that was very prominently how Alicent Hightower and Kristen Cole were having sex when we saw them together. One was mounted on the other. Anyway.
Okay. And that is Sam's observation that he wanted to fit in.
I see the tapestry. That's not even. Listen, we're not at prop watch yet. I got a
Yeah, I
prop
know.
watch
I'm
topic.
looking
for
at
you.
the notes. I'm really excited about prop watch. To hear you just say this word is going to make me giggle.
We're gonna have the little RMA tag on this one.
Well, I'm going to mark it. Anytime we swear, I mark it explicit. So we'll do that. Yeah. Oh shit. Okay.
All right.
Number 5, Harrenhal.
Harrenhal. We're finally get to Harrenhal after being teased for all the way back to season 1 final episodes. They're talking about going to Harrenhal.
Do we see Harrenhal when the Strongs are burned alive? Is that at Harrenhal or is
So
that at
we
a different location?
that's at Harrenhal, and we see them. That's where they die in the fire. So we see the aftermath of that, and I think we see the three assassins basically arriving at Harrenhal. So I shouldn't say that. We've been to Harrenhal before in the show. Obviously, we've been to Harrenhal in Game of Thrones, but we're finally spending some extended time here. And Daemon seems like he's making this his base of operations. So I imagine we'll be coming back.
Really, with Harrenhal in particular, I have a my brief frustration about how they introduced it in this episode. We have Daemon on Dragonback coming into this structure, the fortress. There are individuals, guards presumably, that run away screaming dragon. Then he enters the ruins and doesn't see anybody. He punches one guard in the face and then opens up a door into like a dinner being had by the Lord of Harrenhal. And
Yeah,
it's
with
like we talked a little bit before we started recording, and I just it didn't make any sense. Like I know that you mentioned like the drama of walking through Harrenhal and having it be spooky and all the rain is still coming down and you don't know if the Greens have gotten there first, if he's going to have to fight anybody. It's such a weird introduction because if you're flying in and you show me guards running away screaming dragon and none of them run up to the Lord of Harrenhal and are like, hey, someone on Dragonback is here. We don't know who it is. Could be good, bad. We don't know. And then they're surprised when Daemon walks in the door. So it's just a really weird introduction.
yeah, and then he proceeds to pledge fealty and kind of shit talk his own nephew, who's working for Aegon and is now the Master of Whispers. So it's like, okay, so you were prepared to bend the knee, and maybe you would have bent the knee to whomever showed up, whichever side showed up. But either way, if you are going to be inviting, why not just find him, reassure him that you're not going to fight him, and then invite him to dinner? It also struck me like if they wanted to, they were going for kind of a spooky feel while he was moving through Harrenhal, right? It was dark and it was raining and there was lightning and then there were bats squeaking, and a couple times it hinted at him hearing somebody coming, and eventually it's the one guard. You could have had almost a comedic moment or like kind of a funny moment that would have set up this expectation versus reality dynamic that we get with the visions and the overall feel of Harrenhal. When you had something like, oh, Prince Daemon, follow me, dinner is served, or something like that, like really undercutting the unease with this like very genial invitation,
Mm-hmm.
followed by the exact same conversation that you had. So yeah, it was kind of a weird introduction. But then things get weirder. We have Daemon having a vision. I don't know, was he touching the weirwood tree in what I'm assuming is the Godswood? Although canonically speaking, the Harrenhal Godswood is gigantic.
Yeah, when he pops out of his vision, it looks like he's pulling his hand away from the
Okay,
trunk.
which so I'm sure that there are going to be book nerds, and I don't count myself as a book nerd. I like the books. I've only read Fire and Blood once and then only parts of it. I'm, like I said, in the middle of rereading A Song of Ice and Fire. So this is basically saying that Daemon Targaryen is a green seer, which would be a first because I don't think there's any other Targaryen green seers as far as I know. People talk about the various incarnations of magic in Westeros or in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. So this was interesting because also green seer, both in the books and in the show, is implied to be someone who can kind of slip into the weirwood network, which is this concept that all the weirwoods are connected to one another. And then you can look through the eyes of the tree and see things that happened in the past or see things that happened in the future if you're especially powerful, or potentially even see things that are happening somewhat concurrent to your own time. But Daemon doesn't do that. Daemon has a vision of old, or well, not old, but of a young Rhaenyra, so Rhaenyra from the past, sewing the head of Jaehaerys back onto his body, like we saw in that episode. And so obviously those things never happened, but Daemon has a vision of it. So it's much more akin to some of the visions that people get that are unconnected from the Weirwood network, but are more connected to prophecies. And often this is George R. R. Martin. In some cases, I should say, it's George R. R. Martin foreshadowing events, such as Daenerys in the House of the Undying has a bunch of visions, including one that is very heavily foreshadowing the Red Wedding. It's a man with the head of a wolf sitting at a table in a feast surrounded by corpses, right? And there's a handful of other things as well. So this was interesting because this is not in the book at all. The vision it's not in the book at all. Anyway.
And I'm assuming that lady at the end is going to play a much larger role going forward, the one who speaks to him.
Yes. So I'm trying to remember. I should have looked it up, but I believe that is going to be Alice Rivers, who is, it's kind of vague what her ancestry is, although it's implied that she is a strong bastard. And the Strongs are first men. And it's implied that she also has kind of first men powers. So wargang or green sight or something like that. It's also part of this tradition of the maesters describing any woman with some amount of authority as being kind of magical or a sorceress or a witch, and doing that in a very negative way. So we'll see the truth of it. But she does make this proclamation about Daemon will die here being Harrenhal. I can't recall if in the book they have a physical relationship. They might, but she ends up being kind of a survivor of the war and will have she could have a prominent role in what happens at Harrenhal during the course of the war.
Our next thing is Seasmoke being restless. Now you have the question, is it war or Laenor? Now I think it's more war, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Just with everything going on and then not having a dragon rider at the moment. I think they're trying to make the case that Seasmoke is restless and they should find somebody else to ride it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I pull out of it. I don't think it really has much to do with, I don't know if your question is saying, does Seasmoke know that Laenor is alive?
I think it's, does Seasmoke know that Laenor has now died? And that's what's causing him to be restless.
Oh, I don't think it's that.
No? Okay.
No.
Can I ask?
Is that it?
Well, so I didn't watch the show when it came out on Sunday night. I was busy with child stuff and house stuff and everything else that comes with. And we were hosting your parents on Sunday night. So there's a series of articles that come out, and I don't read anything. I don't listen to anything. I don't watch anything before I see the episode and at least collect my thoughts, and we record. But I did see the headline of an article that said House of the Dragon fans think that a major character has died off screen. And when I saw the headline, I was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to ignore it because there's a couple, there's a few things that could be, there's a few things that could be referencing depending on what happens in episode 3. And now I think that what I haven't gone back and read the article, but I think that was talking about Laenor because there's a heavy implication that there is this deep bond between a dragon and its rider, right? We've talked about how does Daemon's dragon know to do the things that it does when he's trying to intimidate those Kingsguard, right? How do dragons seem to respond like Melis, the dragon of Rhaenys, right? She does some very specific things in the escape from the dragon pit, seemingly without Rhaenys giving her direct commands. And so if there is this connection, the death of a rider would seemingly have a big impact on the dragon. We saw that a little bit with Vhagar and Laena. So maybe Seasmoke has this, up to this point, has been fine because Laenor is alive and Ryder could come back at some point, but now Laenor is dead. And if he was, that it would resolve a pretty significant hurdle to Seasmoke having another rider. Because this other idea is that no one dragon cannot have more than one rider at a time. But a dragon can have multiple riders in series. So that's why I think it might be the fact that Laenor is dead is because they've also hinted that there seems to be at least a desire among certain people on Dragonstone to get a dragon.
It just seems like a stretch. All they did
It-
was show you like a dragon being restless. And I think
sure.
fans are then like, oh, Laenor must be dead. But they're never going to come out and say that. So
Right.
I
And
don't know.
it would be
Until
really
there's a behind the scenes interview with like the pod or the not the podcasters
showrunner.
with with the producers and showrunners
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, this is why. Then it's all going to be hearsay speculation that
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we're going to get Carl Corey sneaking back to Dragonstone and be like, hey, got hit by
I'm
a bus.
back.
Yeah. Like he choked on a lamprey pie or something
Yeah.
like that. So we'll see. I think it's something to watch for what they do with Sea Smoke, how they explain if he gets another rider and what happened to Laenor. But that's speculation on my part.
Oh, I saw something on TikTok actually.
Oh,
It was the scene in episode 1 where Rhaenyra finds the cloak of Luke.
oh yeah.
And the video was like, it's so much sadder when you realize that whole scene that it's two mothers finding out that their sons have died. Because Rhaenyra's dragon was the mother of Luke's dragon.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you see the dragon wing wash up on shore. And the dragon also has a pretty visceral reaction to seeing the remains. So I was like, oh man, yeah, that does hit a little bit different.
That's tough. I didn't know that. I thought that was evidence of the dragon having a bond with its rider, and so Cyrax knew that Rhaenyra was emotionally upset, and so reacted in kind. But no, it's its own reaction to its own child. Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, a little tidbit.
Okay,
next
well,
up,
that kind of connects to this next point.
Book connections to Rhaena and the kids leaving.
Right. So in this episode, Rhaena, who is the other daughter of Daemon and Laena, the one who does not have a dragon, is tasked with escorting Joffrey, who is the youngest son of Rhaenyra and Laenor, to the Eyrie, along with Aegon and Viserys, her two sons with Daemon, along with I think it's 4 dragon eggs, something like that, three or 4 dragon eggs. And so this is, I think, slightly different from the books, where I believe Joffrey and Baela go to the Eyrie, and the younger kids are sent over the sea, which I think is the plan. But it seems like at first they're all going to go to the Eyrie, and then Baela is going to go to, I think, Pentos with the 2 youngest kids and bring these dragon eggs. So we'll see what happens. In the books, the 2 youngest children are older, and they both have dragons they both have living dragons who are old enough to at least one of them fly. So we'll see if there's going to be any more time jumps or something with those dragon eggs specifically. And then you talked earlier about the mother of, I think it's Vermax, was the dragon that Vhagar killed when she also killed Luke. But there was speculation. I saw speculation that the dragon eggs that are given to Rhaena are the same dragon eggs that eventually end up with Daenerys, because she gets the 3 dragon eggs that have turned to stone. I think this is actually, if they could do this, there's no reason that they couldn't in the universe of the shows. In the books, it's very heavily hinted that those 3 dragon eggs at this point in the story are already across the Narrow Sea and were stolen by a character named Alyssa Farman, who was involved with the Targaryens earlier in the reign of an earlier king. But we'll see what happens. Those dragon eggs could eventually resurface and become Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal.
Damn, Alyssa stealing dragon eggs. We also joked beforehand that it's really funny how he has pretty fantastical names, Cersei, and then there's just Alan.
Yeah, but like you said, you got to spell it with a Y, so it's fantasy.
The time has come.
Prop watch. Here we go.
For prop watch, and I am very excited to see Sam not giggle his way through this prop watch.
Right. So I already mentioned the scene with Aegon and his friends, and they're basically taking that young squire out to lose his virginity, and they go to this brothel. and Aegon just starts tearing open all of the little sex booths that people are occupying, ripping the curtains back. And we get one scene where Aegon does this, and it's shot with in between. There's in front of the camera is, I'm assuming, a sex worker giving a patron fellatio. And it's very obvious that it's a prosthetic penis. And so, prop watch, we have a dildo. Yeah.
Prop watch is now peaked.
Prop watch is peaked. Yeah, there's no, once you get you can't come back from full dildo.
Yeah, it was a strange sequence of events. I remember being taken aback a little bit. I do think it's good that in all of Game of Thrones and all of House of the Dragon so far, they've always asked female actresses to go like full nudity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy that it's finally becoming it's more equitable. It's more of like a two-way street now.
Mm-hmm.
We have the actor who plays Aemond gives us a full frontal nudity scene. So I think it's nice that we're hitting some more equality in terms of what showrunners are asking actors and actresses to do. I was pretty content with that. I wasn't happy at all, but
it was more happy with the dildo scene.
Yeah, it's like I was thrilled to see a dildo.
Yeah,
But I
mean, it was
to actually know that it's the actors and actresses are being treated more equally, and it's not historically accurate to just see naked women all the time. Like there's going to be naked men as well, and to only ever show naked women just seemed insincere and sexist pretty much. And then when you have this and male actors who are also willing to show nudity, I think,
and
it's a good sign.
Unlike Game of Thrones, the nudity and the sexual content always seems to be 100% secondary to what's happening in the scene, right? The point of the scene was not to titillate the audience or to, do the famous sex position, right? It was to characterize Aegon as a carousing, entitled jerk.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene also, like, they move so quickly that you don't actually see anything. You know that their people are naked and that there are sex acts happening, but they don't linger on it, right? And I feel like that's something that season, especially some of the early seasons of Game of Thrones, would do a lot. Where like you have these like long shots of
where it's just gratuitous
sex acts, where it's totally gratuitous. And to your point, the actresses are there exposed for long periods of time. Yeah, like here, Aemond was really the only person who we see for more than half a second. And again, it wasn't gratuitous. It was him being intruded upon and then deciding to leave. And it was much more about the characters in that scene. And then the only other thing was we got more kind of showing the toys that Rhaenyra was either packing up or had been left behind, and she was then putting away. And it leads to her finding this message from Alicent, which I'm assuming that was the message that Alicent sent to her following Luke's death, that she seemingly never read because she seems to break the wax for the first time. And that leads to the sept conversation. But one thing I liked too, and we didn't mention it in the discussion of Rhaena leaving with these kids, is all the kids now are gone, right? The only people that are left on Dragonstone, the younger people, are Jacaerys, who seems to be a fully grown adult and is acting like it and wants to be involved. And then you had Bela, who is a dragon rider, who's already out there being engaged. Now, she hasn't gone through a fights yet, but she doesn't seem to be shying away from her role. And then we only have one other young child, which is Jaehaera in King's Landing. And I doubt that we're going to get a lot with her over the course of the season. And so we're reducing de-emphasizing the child cast. It seems like we're having more adult actors coming in for some of these as the roles are expanding, but it's also serving to highlight, I think it's highlighting Rhaenyra's changing position from mother and queen to now queen and leader of a faction in a war.
And that was episode 84, everybody. You can follow us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things Podcast, if you would like to be involved with that. You can send us emails at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. Episodes usually come out every Wednesday, unless I or Sam are busy, like the last couple weeks. We've been a little late, but we don't get paid for this, so you get an episode when we give you an episode.
We will only get paid when the Rings of Power is back on and that sweet, sweet Amazon check comes. I mean,
Bezos. Yeah, Bezos. If you are looking for someone to adopt, I'm available.
he's not too far, right? Or just he doesn't live in Seattle.
I highly doubt he lives. Yeah.
He's probably decamped for a lower tax state.
Florida.
Florida.
Well, that's it for me. Bye, everybody.
Good night.